OpenBiome is a non-profit stool bank. Think of it kind of like the Brown Cross. So essentially we do what blood banks do, but for stool. Stool has this very unique ability to give back bacteria, and that allows us to really treat a very, very potent disease called C. diff. C. diff is a leading hospital-acquired infection, and antibiotics don't really work against it, but believe it or not, stool works very, very well. They work together actually quite synergistically. So OpenBiome is the biggest conduit for translational research. We do a lot of clinical trials using fecal transplants to affect other diseases, including inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, for example. And that's like very potent, but one of the things that we try to figure out is what's the secret sauce? What's the bacteria look like? And so my position at MIT allows me to get into the bioinformatics of things and look into the bacterial world. So that allows me to really work together in driving kind of clinical work that it translates from bench to bedside, but also kind of ensure that we know mechanistically what we're doing and why. I think for C. diff, everyone's poop's the same. We want safe poop, and I think something that's really important to emphasize is that OpenBiome is very, very rigorous. Less than 2.8% of donors actually pass our rigorous screening process, so it's actually much harder to be a poop donor than get into Harvard. We don't think there's any differences. We know there's no significant differences between different donors from an efficacy perspective. It seems to work all the same for every type of donor. For C. diff, we think the story is very different for other diseases. We just finished a randomized control trial for fecal transplants and ulcerative colitis, and it seemed like there was one donor that just really worked. And so we're starting to examine what is the secret sauce in that donor? What bacterial profile is leading to clinical cure compared to the ones that didn't work? And I think that's something that's very exciting for me. Two studies I could tell you about that are already enrolling patients is in a disease called irritable bowel syndrome. We're working with Montefiore Hospital, with Olga Arantinitis, Larry Brandt. It's a multi-center study, so New York, NYU, and Yale. And so we have a study that's looking at a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, so the study that changed the hearts and minds of doctors to see if fecal transplants may have an impact on patients that have irritable bowel syndrome, the diarrhea type. The other study that we're enrolling in right now is looking at fecal transplants for patients with Crohn's disease. So in a specific version, actually, so these are people that have had Crohn's disease that have got so much inflammation in their colon, in their small bowel, I should say, where they have to get a resection, they have to cut out the disease bit. And unfortunately, about 50% of the time, it comes back. And so we're trying a study, basically a randomized study where one group will get fecal transplants, basically an induction therapy with a colonoscopy, and then maintenance capsules versus kind of no treatment. And we're going to look at the end, look at their colon to see if there's any evidence of Crohn's disease in either group, and hopefully the group that got the treatment may be better off. So that's an exciting study. We're working with Alan Moss at Beth Israel, as well as Jessica Allegretti and Frank Ferre at Brigham Women's Hospital and BMC. People are certainly wondering if we can get to certain strains, and I think that'll be a very, very exciting opportunity. But I think there's some caveats that we should think. To get to a certain strain, I think it fits our conventional model of medicine of getting reductionistic and thinking about a single factor that affects the disease. I think what's very exciting about fecal transplants, it's a paradigm shift. It's about systems biology. You might need the entire ecosystem. The ecosystem that's in perfect balance and harmony already. Years and years of evolution have allowed it to be in balance. And the story that I commonly tell is, well, we had a similar story with ecosystems that get disrupted with single strains in a different way when we talk about New Zealand. So New Zealand had a pest problem, and they said, oh man, these pests are terrible. We need to deal with this problem. Instead of dealing it with chemicals, they went and they got some possums that are natural predators for this pest. And the possums did a fantastic job. They killed this pest. They also killed everything else around it. And there was no checks or balances. There was no predators for the possum, so they kind of went rampant. And so one wonders if there's no checks or balances with an ecosystem, what will happen? And it remains to be seen what will happen. I'm excited and hope that's the case, where we can figure out one bug that affects one disease. The reality is we may not be able to. We haven't been able to do that with blood in a way. And are we able to actually use the entire community that's already in a natural homeostasis? Maybe that's the better approach. I think I'm excited to see both parallel pathways exist, and in fact, that exists right now. We know we have many years ago when we did blood transfusions for anemia. We're like, oh great, that's like, it works really well. And then we developed a synthetic called EPO, erythropoietin. But we still have blood transfusions. So there's this parallel path where I think it'll depend on what it's for. But I think the overall take-home message is that I think synthetics are very exciting. We're nowhere near them yet. But I think we should keep in the back of our mind that there may be equally opportunistic ways of altering the microbiome with whole system community.